Excellent. So let's just get started. Very quickly, we have again a few insights on engineered materials. It's a broad range here, right? I mean, we are describing engineered materials all the way from polyamide, so things like nylon 6,6, for example, all the way to catalysts and other inorganic materials. But if you take nylon 6,6, for example, we are seeing these are fairly mature materials, but what we are seeing is new growth opportunities in and around these materials. So for example, nylon 6,6 has a number of applications, but some of the key drivers are the same megatrends that I was talking about this morning, which was in and around electrification of transportation, automobile, electric vehicles, and other broader penetration of electronics and high-tech devices. Again, expanding the range of engineered materials. For example, when we look at MDI, and I talked a little bit about this in the morning, and we look at the entire value chain from a feedstock point of view, what we are finding is that a lot of existing players, Huntsman is a good example, are going back and taking a look at their existing asset base and saying, how do you squeeze more value out of this in order to make more of the feedstocks for some of the applications that are ending up, for example, in markets enabled by these megatrends. And so, it's not a lot of new capacity addition, it is reconfiguration of existing capacity to meet market needs. Again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but for a lot of these engineered materials markets, the spaces are highly consolidated, and within these markets, what we are seeing is companies are building out integrated value chains. So pretty much all the players here, Huntsman, BASF, Dow, Wanhua, all of them are focused on building out integrated value chains. And that's one way in which they are trying to maximize margins in otherwise fairly competitive markets. Again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but we are seeing companies develop supply chains in and around various energy transition markets. This is the electrolyzer value chain, and we are seeing a lot of companies that are active in this. But a lot of the investment now is with the smaller players who are focused on building a lot of components that are going into these electrolyzer value chains. Okay, here's a plug for green cement. This is a study that we just published, and there's a lot of room and opportunity to reduce CO2 emissions from cement manufacturing. There are a lot of pathways to reducing CO2 emissions in cement manufacturing. One of the pathways is the development of new technologies, especially around materials. So anyways, with that, let's get into the panel discussion. Maybe we'll start with a little bit of an introduction to your companies, what do you do, and then we can go from there. Jeff, we'll start with you.
Sure. So Jeff Dysard, I'm here with NuMat Technologies. I've been with NuMat for about a year. Before that, I spent about 20 plus years in various specialty chemical businesses in oil and gas and semiconductor, which are totally the same. But I've been at NuMat. The company has been around for about 10 years. It was founded out of Northwestern as a startup out of a professor's lab there, with the objective of commercializing metal organic framework technology. Metal organic framework, some of you may or may not be familiar with that particular chemistry field, but it's a field that's been around for a little over 20 years, largely been an academic pursuit for that time. It's grown over time. NuMat kind of started maybe a little early, and is the first company to kind of commercialize the technology, and that has been done in the semiconductor world, where the materials are being used to store and deliver gases that are used in semiconductor production. The second kind of area that the company has focused on has been what we call extreme environment technology. Really what that is personal protective equipment, largely funded by the Department of Defense for things like chem bio suits or gas masks or gloves, which the soldiers and other folks need to be protected from toxic gases. And these materials are able to perform the function of both, say, the carbons, engineered carbons that are used today, or metal oxides, which either destroy or capture these gases. Metal organic framework materials are able to both destroy and capture. What I would say is the technology is unique in a couple of ways versus other materials, things like carbons or zeolites or metal oxides. That is, they're highly porous, so much higher surface areas than those materials. They have controlled structure, so you're able to tune the pore sizes to your liking. And then you have the ability to functionalize these materials. So that's the advantage of this material class. The disadvantage is that you have, almost infinite possibilities to make materials. So finding the right material that you can make at cost, at scale, and have performance is the challenge. So it's a problem of abundance. What I would say is in the last year since I joined the company, what's happened is we've seen kind of, I wouldn't say an explosion, but a maturity of use in the energy and oil and gas space. And so what we're seeing is us being kind of the first credible partner that's been able to scale this technology is the opportunity to partner with a lot of companies that are here at this conference and at others that are exploring this technology for ways to make the refinery or chemical plant more efficient. And or for capturing carbon. So you'll see a lot of public releases where metal organic framework materials are being used as adsorbents in carbon capture technologies. And what we're seeing is that there is no industrial base to make those materials in the US, and we're the first company to build a plant to do that. So we have the opportunity to partner with a lot of those companies.
How would you describe metal organic framework? Like, what is it? What does it look like?
Yeah, so think about it as kind of Lincoln logs is how I think about it, where the logs come together is a metal center, and organic molecules are used to link those metal centers. So you have organic molecules that have multiple functional points, and then the metals are used to link those together, and they form a crystalline material. Those materials are sometimes nanoparticles, sometimes micron-sized crystals. Those then typically, for a given application, have to be formed or coated or put into some usable material. So there's a lot of product development that needs to be done.
So it goes onto some sort of a substrate or something?
Some applications you'll grow on a substrate. Some are, say, pelletized or extruded. Things like a catalyst would be, or a zeolite might be treated. Okay. Other times, we're working on membrane technologies where you may be growing crystals on a support. So different types of application.
Okay. Matt, tell us a little bit about HeatPath. Sure. And what are some applications that you're chasing?
Happy to do that. I got a couple slides here to just kind of here you can introduce.
I follow directions, so Uday told me no slides, so no slides. No slides.
Well, sorry. I do a little better with slides. So what we do at HeatPath Solutions, we're an outgrowth of Nexceris, a company that's been around for about 25 years in the advanced energy and environmental space. I'm Chief Product Officer at Nexceris, but I am spinning out and up the HeatPath Solutions brand. What we're spending a lot of our time working on and where we see a real interesting opportunity particularly at this conference is to talk about how this platform is useful for a range of different chemical reactions, from things as diverse as steam reforming at the high temperature, high pressure end, to Fischer-Tropsch reactions and a lot of other things in between. So what we have, the value propositions that come around this technology, in which we create a high thermal conductivity support and apply these thin coatings of catalyst on the exterior, is that we can help improve productivity and selectivity of reactions, cut energy requirements, and overall expand the operating window for a range of different chemical reactions. At the core of it is our catalyst structure, and you can kind of see some images. These are kind of test 6mm tablets that we use. For looking at different reactions, we have a wide range of capability of forming that by dry pressing, granulation, extrusion, a lot of very common ceramic manufacturing routes. But then what we are also able to do is to modify the surface of these tablets so that they accept catalyst very well and then perform well in application. We started off our work being funded by the Department of Energy about 5 years ago to look at steam reforming in particular, and then we later with a commercial partner explored a lot about the dry reforming space. And what we were able to find is that by modifying the thermal conductivity of the support, we were able to reduce the overall energy requirement. We were able to show through simulation some meaningful and useful improvements, lowering temperatures of the reactor and still obtaining similar results. But what was really became most attractive was as we looked at the dry reforming case, we could significantly reduce the amount of steam that was required for these reactions. Because we have a thin coating, we were able to avoid coking in those reactors and operate stably at steam to carbon ratios below 0.3 for hundreds of hours. The exact same formulation in the same size tablet, just pressed solid, we found that there was a pronounced and rapid coking reaction. So we see this as really kind of an enabling both heat transfer, but then it became kind of cool because it was also a mass transfer benefit to the reactor in what we saw for dry reforming. We then extended it because, of course, the logical thing to do is go from high steam reforming to Fischer-Tropsch because they're all almost the same as semiconductors and process chemicals. But what we did in this case, because was to test out the same support structure for the FT reaction, and here we saw even more significant benefits in terms of productivity of the reaction. So you can kind of see the structure in the micrographs there, the composite core of the tablets, then we have an aluminum protective layer, and then ultimately about a 25 micron thick coating. If we operated that as a tablet of a similar sort of size, you can see the orange data. You know, we experienced thermal runaway of this cobalt-based FT catalyst around where you would expect, right around 200 degrees C. The cool thing about putting it onto HeatPath was we were then able to extend that operating range as high as 265 degrees without that thermal runaway because we're dissipating the heat away from the microscale sites where runaway can occur. Preventing that runaway in the bed, we maintain the ASF distribution of the product, you can see down there at the bottom, and had about a 20 times improvement in overall productivity for the same catalyst formulation. So we did these two kind of extremes in our product development work and understanding the platform we designed. And what I'm excited about now is that we're starting to look at where might this, in addition to lots of opportunities with established reactions that are out there, is there a place where we could revisit what folks have tried before for thermochemical reaction and had issues because of selectivity and productivity? And the thing that we're looking at is the conversion of dextrose sugars or other biologically derived sugars using thermochemical routes to create low carbon intensity products that can displace things like adipic acid. That's one of our milestone reactions that we're looking at in what we do. And so this is a business where we're looking for opportunity to talk with folks about what raw materials are of most interest, both to the chemicals industry here, and then also looking at consumer product goods for some of their formulation needs where they're looking to decarbonize their precursors. So we're actively looking for folks to talk to about in this space, learn more, and make sure we're positioning this appropriately.
Thanks, Matt. When you start thinking about commercializing these technologies, so for example, this pathway,
Yep.
Who are some natural partners or companies that you think could benefit from a pathway like this?
Yeah. So, as we look at it, a company that's kind of in the startup stage, we're definitely pursuing and trying to understand ways to work with folks who do catalysis or process chemistries now for kind of a B2B relationship for our baseline technology. As we look at, generating adipic or some of the molecules along the way, be they gluconic, glucaric, others like that, we're trying to look downstream at the consumer packaged goods folks themselves. They don't often get to choose necessarily what chemicals they're working with in their formulations, and if they could decarbonize, like we heard earlier today, McDonald's wants that green label on their soda cup, but not as much as those two personal care products sitting right next to one another on the shelf, one of them with a green label and one of them without. That the opportunity cost for the consumer to make that choice is so minimal. Anything you can do. So we're looking at that, and then we're also looking for folks in the agriculture sector, again, where...
From a feedstock point.
Yeah, like what we heard, this morning.
Citronic, yeah.
Yeah. Where that whole concept of finding higher value pull from the market for these corn products like sugars and starches. So one thing that has been a nice win for us on our concept here, and some of the things that we've talked about, the National Corn Growers Association, gave us a small award to kind of continue to develop our business proposition, because corn growers are very conscious of some of the things we talked about earlier today about ethanol volumes and where those are going.
Okay, excellent. Jeff, you guys are building your first commercial plant. Is most of it spoken for? Are you looking for people to offtake more capacity? Where does it stand?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the initial applications that we're working on have the potential to fill that capacity over its initial lifetime, no question. But what we're also seeing an opportunity, I view this plant that we just announced as kind of a specialty plant. And there's a lot of opportunity where we're working with partners already, and we think there's more where they're doing demonstration type projects on their scale. But in this world, a demonstration unit requires 5-10 metric tons of material, right? So we think this plant can also help enable the technology, particularly in the energy and oil and gas sector, to take the customers from where they are today in a research phase to more of a development or commercial phase, and we're working with people, and we think we have more capacity to do that. Okay. Today, our kind of boilerplate capacity is somewhere between 50 and 100 metric tons of material. That depends on kind of mix of what we're making and yields, et cetera. But with incremental capital under the same rooftops, it's kind of like 300 metric tons of capacity. Some of the applications we're working on, I mentioned chem biosuits. If say we won all the contracts for the government, we'd have to build a new plant. Okay. And so there are applications, and for any one, say if one DAC project is successful, you have to build another plant, right? If one refinery project is successful, you have to build another plant. So I think there's a lot of capability to do demonstration here, and there's another scale jump for some of these applications.
Okay, excellent. How are these materials manufactured? Is it like predominantly batch campaign mode manufacturing, or? Today,
what we're doing is batch manufacturing. Okay. I would say at the next scale, I think you could do this what I'll call semi-continuous. Yeah. We've worked through some DOE grants on continuous processing, and we think for certain materials that's possible. It wouldn't be possible for all materials, and so eventually there'll be a mix, I would say. What we're doing today is batch.
Okay. I don't know if you can share this, but I'll still ask this. What does a plant like that cost these days?
It's pennies compared to what you all have been talking about this morning, right? So I think even if you were going to make a kiloton plant, you're probably talking, low triple digits. Okay. So 100 million type investment. Will definitely not be a B. It'll be an M, and probably three digits.
And you guys are well capitalized right now for this, or
not for that? Okay. No. In fact, we're kind of I would say about ready to go into kind of Series D, I would call it. Okay. And that's kind of surviving what I'll call the valley of death for the government, right? So our next customer is the government. Ultimately, we're business. We're a sub, so we'll sell to somebody else who will make the part, who will then supply. And in order, in any materials business, as many of you know, and before anybody will buy it, you have to actually scale it. Yep. which is what we're doing. And then when the orders come is kind of a question mark. But we think that at least for the first application there will be in kind of the next 18 months will be the first commercial adoption for that space.
Okay. So Matt, maybe tell us a little bit about syngas value chain and where your products fit in.
Yeah, so we're looking at a couple different opportunities. I mean, the technical approach, the way to make the materials that we make, we think that they can drop in well at the sizes and shapes that folks typically use for steam reforming. And we did look at that and have worked with some partners to validate that does make technical sense. The thing that we found, was more interesting, perhaps was the opportunity in dry reforming, where you're utilizing CO2 and increasing that carbon content in your syngas stream for downstream processes. There we feel like there are different opportunities for smaller reactors where you may not have to have as complex, or you can have a differently shaped sort of media. And then other things that we keep an eye on in our overall company looking at the syngas spaces, we do other parts of Nexceris do work on the high temperature electrolysis system. So we're always kind of in a tension with our own selves there a bit, understanding who's got the best path to get syngas made, and then looking at different low carbon intensity paths to fuels or other chemicals. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of partnerships, in terms of working with other stakeholders in the value chain, I mean, I'm assuming for early stage companies that's fairly important. So who all are you working with? So for example, Jeff, you're working with the U.S. government. I guess, what do those partnerships look like with other stakeholders? Yeah,
so it really is market dependent and what we're doing, right? I might say for that example, there's for each of the products, there's kind of the government itself. So in this case, the Department of Defense. We also do some work with the DOE, but the Department of Defense, and then of course their suppliers. So our partners are people like 3M or Avon or several others that make the part, right? So say if it's gas masks, there's say 2 gas mask providers to the government, right? And we work with them. Or if it's chem biosuits, there's an ecosystem there you have to integrate into. Sometimes we're working on joint developments directly with somebody, so it's kind of business to who will be the consumer.
Yep.
So sometimes we're business to business, sometimes we're business to really consumer. So folks like Aramco or ExxonMobil or GE or Baker Hughes or folks like that, Sumitomo, we'll do joint developments with them or joint work where they will be the end user of the product at the end of the day. So it really just depends on what the project looks like.
Okay. Matt, who are you collaborating with? And
a lot of things are certainly similar because where we are, we're always trying to find the right match between where we have good, solid expertise and bring value to partners, and then making sure there's that complementary piece so that we get it where it needs to go. More broadly, our company, Nexceris, has used this model with Honeywell to spin up a lithium-ion safety sensor. So Honeywell actually markets that through our Extralis brand, their Extralis brand, and sells our Lion Tamer sensor throughout the world for protection on lithium-ion systems. But we also have an interesting facet to our business where we engage at B2B, similar sort of joint development agreements and things like that. But we offer materials and material solutions to folks as a service as well. So that helps us a lot in aligning products as we develop them, so that there is a ready-made customer, again, kind of there to take that off from us or do co-development together. So where we are right now in looking at things for HeatPath, we're very actively looking for partners who can see something that we can't from where we sit. They know they have a reaction they need help with, and we're there to provide that assistance and help them do evaluations and demonstrations.
So it's almost like it's almost like paid R&D, right? I mean, it gives you insight into what customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shared sort of journey. We have part of the solution, they have part of the solution. We get there together, and we both win.
I think at least from my brief experience, I think the trick with any startup when you're doing that is to make sure you're not doing kind of sponsored R&D, so that you're not doing R&D to R&D work where there's not really a business problem.
Exactly.
And it's weeding out those opportunities that are really just science projects at the end of the day versus a real business need. Because if you spend too much time on those sponsored R&D things, you're going to die because there's no commercial outlet if you solve the problem. And I think some of the early challenges with NuMat, we're learning that lesson the hard way, right? Where you get to the end, you solve the problem, and then you're like, okay, where's the business? And it doesn't happen. So
exactly.
So let me open this up to questions at this point of time from the audience and see if there are questions.
Is there anybody in the audience that actually thought they would need to use the safety exit when Uday talked about it this morning? That's the only real question in the room.
So maybe while the questions are bubbling up, so I have a question. So I guess what does the rest of the year look like for each of you and next year, right? So what does the short-term pathway look like?
Yeah, so for us, it's completing the capital work that we're doing. So we're weeks away from moving into our new facility in Chicago, and then we have a second plant we're bringing online by the end of the year. So the team is really laser focused on that. There's kind of what I'll call offtake agreements for those contracts we're working through, and then there'll be a fundraise later in the year. So kind of the next 12 to 18 months is really filling that plant capacity with hard agreements on the things we're working on, whether that is our own product development or making products for some of the partners we're talking to, and then getting that plant built.
Yeah. So for us, it's a two-track sort of thing. Again, we're moving forward with some joint development agreements with folks looking at HeatPath and different reactions and working with those kind of on a case by case. With the sugar to chemicals approach, I'm in the midst of we're seeking some funding to get that up and off the ground, applying to a lot of accelerators, incubators, really working on getting together a going venture in that space. So those are the big things we're working on right now.
Okay. Questions? Okay, I'll keep going then while we see if we have more questions. So Jeff, you have come from a predominantly corporate kind of an environment into an early stage company, right? I'm curious how, what's your experience been? I'm assuming this is the first early stage company that you have been involved with, or you?
So what's interesting is kind of my career. I started really big. My career started with ExxonMobil. And then I downsized to a public company, but we were about a $300 million company when I started. But the kind of back half of my career at the company I was at, we were doing M&A. So I had the opportunity to manage a startup that we acquired and then scaled, and then another few businesses that were at different stages of growth. So kind of while I did have corporate experience, some of my experience was taking kind of early stage technology, what I say proven technologies that were not scaled yet, and then going through those growing pains of scaling the technology. So I intentionally went to a company where I thought it was kind of at that stage, which is where NuMat is. It's not that there's nothing in the kitty, right? You're not doing pure discovery work. It's more scaling the technology. So I think that's good. My background is a PhD scientist anyway, so I worked in R&D for a long time, so I've done the discovery work too.
Right. So what was surprising when you came to NuMat?
Let's see. I think anytime you're working in a startup, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So it's and I think I've experienced this with other kind of research portfolios I've encountered in my career, and it's kind of focusing the effort. I think it's easy to, you're looking for a lot of different things and picking the right one or two that can really take you somewhere, particularly when you're a material technology, right? It's different than some of the process technologies we talked about before, which are really, you're solving one problem. Here you have materials that can solve a bunch of different problems. Which one do you focus on? And if you bet, if you're NuMat and you bet on direct air capture, well, that's a really risky proposition, right? Who knows when, who knows if. So picking the right ones that do have commercial applicability. And so I'm really doing some portfolio rationalization when I got to the company. It was something I didn't expect to have to do, but we kind of have done.
And Matt, you've been a lifelong entrepreneur in some form and fashion.
One way or another.
So what do you see as the most challenging part of getting technologies scaled up and commercialized?
Right. I think for me, my personal journey has been more along the lines of what Jeff just mentioned. When you first start out, everything's an opportunity, and man, you could just set the world on fire if they'd only turn you loose, and then they turn you loose for a while, and you're like, wow, I've gone in technical circles and I've learned a tremendous amount, but this is the same chair I got here in, and there are mechanisms out there in the world to make sure that research gets funded and things get moved, new ideas get created, but you really come to realize the onus is on you to figure out what people care about, and it's not whether or not it's an intriguing problem, it's whether or not it solves a problem for somebody else. And that discovery for me has always been what really kind of turned it from what was getting into an R&D slog to, no, somebody actually cared about what I solved, and we're going to go do something with it together. And that really is the part that helps me, when things get tricky or it's not clear which path is the right one, to really, double down on sorting that out and talking with people face to face about what we're going to solve and what we're not. Once you get that kind of impetus going, it becomes a lot easier to get excited about what you're doing.
Last call for, okay.
So I have a question for Jeff. So Jeff, when we talk about your filtration products, how do you see the adoption? Would they be easily retrofittable or easily replaced in, say, traditional uses if there's an existing?
So for the most part, that's what we're doing. We're taking materials that are being used today and replacing them. And so there are some challenges with kind of what I'll say is called formation of these things, so putting them in the right form for use, and then having the lifetimes, but they're solvable problems. So we don't see anything that says these materials behave that differently from other things that are out there, but there are some unique challenges when you have an organic component versus, say, a traditional catalyst, which are typically metal oxides of some sort. So the chemistry is different, it takes some different things. Sometimes the processing is more like polymer processing than it is catalyst processing, but there's technology out there to solve the problems.
Very cool.
That's helpful, thank you.
More questions? Do you guys have questions for the audience?
I already asked my question.
Question.
Jane, yes, please. Thank you.
The question is about the business model for HeatPath. In thinking about the business model, you plan to continue to be the platform providing catalyst, or you're actually thinking about producing product?
Right. So the way that we are currently doing business with folks and developing the platform technology is typically a B2B type relationship driven by joint development, and then depending on the scale required at the end of the day, then we make a choice about who manufactures it or if it's a licensing play. Separate from that, the part that we're, in talking about the sugar to chemicals, that focus there, we're really looking at being more of someone that would offer the chemicals, and then through a joint venture or some sort of way to scale the production of those chemicals to meet the market need. So that there are two different businesses. One's just not quite fully incubated and out on its own. But I wanted to, with this audience in particular, there are a lot of folks I think, it could be an interesting product to collaborate on. And then also I want to be here, part of what I'm learning is, the pull for some of the sustainable alternatives in the chemicals market.
Well, let's thank the panel, and then so we have a break, and we'll reassemble at, I think, 2:40 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Matt.